Hey, this is Brooks, and it's Manhood Podcast, and we are back again with Eric Muschinski to talk about abundance. And welcome back.
Thanks, Brooks.
We had a good talk last time, and over the last few months, a bunch of us have been in this conversation about abundance and manifesting the things that we want in our life in a way that's more than just a list of, a wish list. And I think what's valuable about talking to you about this is that this has been an active practice for quite a few years, or at least a couple years, because I remember when life was different for you.
Absolutely. It's 2014, November. I believe that, my journey with this stuff began, in essence, right around 4 years ago. And then I think it really kicked into high gear about 3.5 years ago. And that's when everything started to change for me, professionally, personally. It took a little bit of time, but things really began to change very, very rapidly. And then what ended up following is my lifestyle, just a lifestyle of freedom, being an entrepreneur, traveling the world. Now I've had I wouldn't call it a problem, but the opposite problem of just staying put, keeping roots and being around family and friends and sticking out Chicago for another 6 weeks while it's a little brisk out there.
Just a little bit. It's brave of you to stay with us.
I'm sure we'll get a lot of compassion on that.
Yeah, boo-hoo, as the entire country is under freeze. So what's the major distinction, or what do you think played into the difference, rather, between the last time we spoke? We talked about Cannes. We talked about some, like, you funding a movie and going to Cannes. I mean, that was the whole motive, because you want to go to Cannes.
Right.
And that was like, it's a nice story, but there didn't necessarily seem to be a lot of depth in that experience. And how is that experience different from this experience years later, where you're I don't personally see it as a similar path at all, but for the person looking from the outside, you have this life where you have a lot of choices and you're doing a lot of traveling. What's the major distinction for you?
I think it's totally different. That was back in 07 or 08. And, I can say that when economically, at that time, I was an investment advisor, alternative investment advisor. A lot of my business was tied to, the economy, even though I didn't think it was. So when the world blew up in 08, 09, I did too. And so that experience was really at the tail end of a temporary prosperity. And I was just in a very, very different place. So coming through that process, I think that event and that time changed a lot of our perspective. But this time it was more of like I would call it a process. There was more of a foundation built, and that I was lucky enough to stumble upon certain people and certain tools and certain things that helped to guide me that I could fall back on a daily basis and work on myself and work on things on a daily basis. And I also had the energy freed up personally, where, I was ready. I was ready in my mid-30s, to crush it, to see where things could go. And part of that's, a spiritual journey as well. But I don't know that it's, when you talk about Cannes, it's funny because I really haven't thought about the distinction between how those things are different. But I think that, hopefully I'm more mature, in terms of what I value. But I do value the freedom, the freedom to come and go and to go places. And I try not to take that for granted, because I know that a lot of people, the 4-hour work week we talk. I hadn't read that when I went to Cannes in 2008, I believe it was. The mindset of, this stuff really came up, well, for me and for you, right, in the last 5 years. So that was a big part of it. It is a shift in worldview.
Yeah, and I just had this. I heard this today, and I heard a guy talking about. He made the distinction, and I think it fits in right to what you're saying. Is that he doesn't look for fun anymore; he looks for happiness, and not knowing the whole story. Before I met you 5-6 years ago, whatever it was, there was a lot of fun being had. There was a lot of seeking pleasure outside of yourself rather than coming from within, and I think that probably has a lot to do with it. For those who are not familiar with some of the words that we tend to use, one being abundance and one being manifestation, those two, why don't you give me your impression of what those two things mean?
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about abundance because I hadn't really thought of that before we were going to speak, but I really... That keys into where my mindset is today, which is, part of what we could talk about is our formula 10-10-10. That's kind of been a little bit of a process, but there's some real tangible things we can look at in terms of how that came about that is used on a daily basis. And one of the 10s is a gratitude list. And for me, whether I've had a little or I've had a lot internally, having an attitude that pauses and gives appreciation and gratitude for what I have, it tends to help me to see that my life is very abundant in a lot of different ways. If I'm in a position of self-pity or pointing the finger or being a victim, I don't have shit. Everybody's against me and things aren't working out, and it's a mindset. It's negative and positive, I think, at the end of the day. You said abundance, and then the other one was?
Manifestation.
And so that, here's the bottom line. So, we talk about a couple of the things that have worked for me is there's a book called The Answer that I recommend to a lot of different people. Author is John Assaraf. And John he was one of the guys who developed The Secret, which a lot of people have seen, which gets into the law of attraction, which for me, it never did it just didn't do it for me. There's a few different reasons for that, but, The Answer gets into, they did the best job in that book that I've seen of really breaking down the fact that our mental state and what we feed it with, what we focus on, can manifest things in our physical reality. They dig into quantum physics and some smart stuff, I would call it, but it's not by any means meant as a textbook. You're not going to get bored reading it. But then the advantages as well is they give tools to make this stuff happen. Two of the things that they look at in the book that are what they preach is affirmations and vision boards. And I'll get back to that in a second. But what they also do in the book is they make the reader get very clear on what it is that you want. And that was part of my problem. And I think it's a part of a lot of people's issue where we just stay waffling in life and kind of go where the wind shows us to go instead of being extremely intentional about certain things. Now, if that intention is not aligned or congruent with our beliefs and with our faith, then I think it can become a mess. However, if it is congruent, what this stuff does for me is it magnifies my ability to believe in these things becoming a reality. It feeds my faith, so to speak. It gives me tools to do my part in just believing that things are going to happen. And so that book is a great one to reference as it pertains to manifestation. There's other stuff that obviously, we've thrown into the mix with 10-10 visualization, which is an exercise that I learned from Matthew Ferry, who's really, he's more of a He's a motivational guy out of Orange County, works with a lot of people in the sales industry, has a small book called Creating Sales Velocity, which I highly recommend for people that are in business. But there was one exercise that he talked about, 10-10 visualization, that really stuck with me. And that's simply a list of 10 things that we're already grateful for and 10 things that we want to manifest. So what's happened is, I combined really what is now called 10-10-10, which is an affirmation list of 10 things. So affirming certain thoughts. I have it right in front of me, my most recent one. And when I started this stuff, one of them that I would use as an example is I travel the world at will. I did not travel the world at will at that time. It was maybe a once-a-year trip to Miami or something when I got a decent check. And over the next few years, traveling at will became a reality. So now it's changed to some other things, but it also talks a lot about affirming things about myself, certain characteristics, certain things that I want to be, I want to become, I want to I want to establish as reality for me, and then a gratitude list of 10 things, which goes into the 10-10 visualization, and then lastly that manifestation list. So that 10-10-10 formula, along with, I would say you can add a little bit of, I don't know if it's rocket fuel or a little bit of gas with a vision board. Mm-hmm. That is something that I think anybody can do, and it's amazing taking 5 or 10 minutes visualizing this stuff, being grateful for what we have, what can end up happening, and you can attest to this too. Things start popping.
Hmm. So I just want to go back to the answer really quickly, and if you have read or watched or listened to The Secret, John is in that. And when people say, "Well, what's the answer?" my short answer is that the answer is the secret for business. And would you say the same thing?
I say it's the secret on steroids.
The secret on steroids. If you are in business, it's definitely the book. For me, I've fallen short on the answer because I got the audiobook, and because I love audiobooks. It's not the book to get an audiobook, because there's a lot of pen to paper stuff that you really can't do while you're driving the car. But that was my take from it. Like if you are need some direction and some real direction, and you are willing to do the action, that answer is going to get you square. And it's interesting how listening because I knew about Matthew Ferry because you gave me the book, and I think what's significant about that book is how small it is. Mm-hmm. And it really brevity is so powerful just in the observation of it. It's not a super thick book where the guy stretched out what he was trying to say. It was real small. But in your description of how it's interesting how it gets, everybody has their own take on it. And not that it's particularly important, but so you said gratitude and manifestation. And the 10-10-10, as I understand it, maybe I heard it from you and from Jason, was that affirmations was in the middle. And I wondered, and that's how I do it. And
you do gratitude first?
I do gratitude first.
It's probably as good or better.
Yeah, because it starts with, so for abundance for me is like this idea that there's more than enough of everything. If you're aligned with whatever that is for you, a higher power, the universe, whatever you want to call it, there's, the source, there's enough of everything. And that could be money or love or relationships or courage, whatever it might be. There's enough of that. And aligning yourself with that starts for me with being grateful for what I already have. This idea that want what you have versus want what you want, because that just gets me grounded and says, oh, wait a second, my life already is abundant. And that what I got out of The Secret, on the financial end of it was, I have more than enough money. That was like verbatim. I have more than enough money. So I would do that. And that allowed me to first say, okay, I'm going to play this game where I say I have more than enough money, and then I get more than enough money because that's what I said. But it also, I started with, which is, I guess in my mind that would be a manifestation because I didn't believe it to be a reality. But once I started with the gratitude, I could see, oh, wait a second, I do have more than enough. In the grand scheme of things, I have way more than enough. I may not be as wealthy as other people or have what other people have, but I have so much. And for me to grasp that, I could now move that immediately from manifestation into affirmation. So it sort of drops from this this want or end result to something that is true at its core. So that is something that I could say every day and feel it. Yeah, that is true. Because I started in gratitude. I was like, wow, I do have the money to live. I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. And that was important because it was a truth, and it was also something for me to be really grateful for. Like almost like an exhale. Like, oh, wow, what am I worried about? Like everything's good right now. So for me, it starts with the gratitude, and actually I have it from top down. So I have gratitude, and when it started, like when I started actively doing the 10-10-10, for me, I would start with kind of general gratitude list for, people in my life and financial situations and health. And now it's evolved to reflect the things that have manifested. So it's sort of, I start with gratitude, then I move to the affirmation list, which is the ideal reality. Is that on my best day, this is the truth. And then the manifestations, as a result of that, have been happening, and they go boom right to the top of the list. Mm-hmm. And now it's sort of this snowball effect where it's weighted, and there's some momentum because it's not just this game that I'm playing. This is a real thing that's happening. And we can talk about specifics, but
yeah, and that's great. And I think even a couple things came up for me when you were talking. Is number one, even if somebody is living paycheck to paycheck, I would think that a lot of people would like to change that or have that change. So some of this goes back to the premise of fake it till you make it. We're going to end up, if we want things to be different, if nothing changes, nothing changes. If we think the same way, we act the same way. That's why people feel stuck. So this is about bringing that freshness in and really looking for something new. And I think what you said in the beginning is really important, which is that your worldview is not one of scarcity, in the sense that, people do this stuff, and, a lot of us, we get into ruts where we think that, if A gets it, then B is out, shit out of luck. And I do not believe that at all. In fact, I believe there's plenty from the standpoint of, my faith in God, the universe, with provision. But at a minimum, I feel like if I have the faith and I take the action, I'm going to get blessed. And it's that simple. If it doesn't happen for somebody else because we're in this crazy world and they don't have that going on, then that's another opportunity for me. But also what you mentioned too was, I think the answer is definitely for people that are entrepreneurs, are in business, have some sort of a practice that they want to grow, to evolve. But what I've also done is I've recommended the answer for people that don't know what they want to do next. Maybe a career change. They're not quite certain about what's next. And the reason for that is because I say the book, you say it's the secret for business. Well, I think that's true, but it's also, I look at it like it's to create your dream life and your dream business. Like that's the way that I describe it. And it is tailored towards business, but to me, it's so much more than that. If I'm going to create my dream life, business is just a part of it. And I don't make distinctions with all these little pockets. And so people could use that format. And that's the other thing. What I've learned with a lot of this stuff is there are no rules. Like if you go through that book and you want to change a certain area of your life, or you want to use 1010 and be grateful for something and manifest something, do whatever you got to do. Like, do it for your spiritual life, do it for your relationships, do it for your health, do it for your business. It doesn't have to all be about money. You could literally take this entire process to juice up your own faith in believing about a destiny that God has for you around charity and service, and say nothing about yourself and do it around what you're going to do for other people. There are no rules to this stuff. And that gave me a lot of freedom to expand and to play, to play around with this, because that also, even though it's not, at the end of the day, it's life and it's not a complete game. Part of me needs a little game, every day to play and to have fun. That kid in me, instead of this mundane routine of becoming an adult and then you're old and then you're dead. Like, I want to play around and see what can happen and see what God can do and see what I can do. What am I capable of? What can happen next? I want an expectancy for things. And even when a lot of this comes true, there's always a new chapter. Like you said, it's fluid. Things go from, I want to manifest this, and then it happens. And then you put it on your gratitude and it's like, okay, there's more space there for what's next. And I go up and down with this stuff. But in the beginning, it was like, I'm ready for a change. I'm ready for a complete change, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to have that happen for once in my life, without self-sabotage or without, just stopping and starting and doing a little bit. This to me is like, I think we've cracked into a format that we've seen miracles happen with our own friends.
Yeah. Yeah. You made me think that, the work that we've done individually, for years now, just personal development, if you are on that path, I think there's a built-in, there's faith, but there's a growing faith about what's possible, in the sense that anything's possible, but there's also, growing evidence. If you've been on a path where you're choosing to do the things that you don't want to do spiritually and emotionally, you want to, act through your fear and get better, whatever that means to you. I think you're probably more prepared to accept that this, like anything, is possible. But if you're not, it just seems like such a great opportunity to put pen to paper, because this is an incredible opportunity just to put what you want down on paper. And for me, you talk about going back to this idea of, well, yeah, it's for business, but this is my life. So I'm fully integrated around this list. That's been my experience too, when I think about it, because when stuff happens in life, sometimes I'm bumped off balance. And in the last year or so, I'm more apt to get to a point really quickly, because I'll be forced to make a decision or forced into a position that I haven't been in before, waver on a question, whatever it is, and think like, I don't know. Who am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to answer this? And I've gone back to that 10-10-10 as an anchor, because when I look at those affirmations, this is who I am. It's not just about like I have more than enough. It's about we can talk about Chris in particular, but he wrote down who he was in the world, regardless of situations, and that was a strong root. And so for me, going back to the 10-10-10 as a reminder of who I am has been super helpful.
Yeah, I look at it as it's a buoy for me. I wake up in the morning and maybe I'm feeling good and I do this stuff and it makes me feel better. Or maybe I'm having an off day and I feel a little negative, or something happens that jars me a little bit, or I'm just feeling blah. And then I can look at this stuff pen to paper. Like you said, there's power in that written word. It's the same premise as goals. Back in the day, I used to listen to Brian Tracy and some of these other guys where, goals are a huge thing. There's not a huge percentage of the population that does a lot of goal setting and then sticks to that, and I learned to do that many of the disadvantages I had in life, one of the things I think that was big was I got some of these tools that they don't teach you in school, but it's a huge advantage if you do it. Like if you do it, not just know about it. But this to me is like, I would say it's like goals on steroids, right? Because we have things that we're shooting for, some every day in the list. Like one of my affirmations I'm looking at right now is I am physically fit and filled with energy. You know, who doesn't want that? But part of me absorbing that, it's not just going to magically say, boom, all of a sudden I have energy every day. But because I know I want to absorb that as my reality, when I'm going through my kitchen and I can reach for X, which is a piece of chocolate, or I can go in the fridge and I can take an acai juice with my all-day energy greens and say, wait a second, I just came from my office where I read my affirmation that I'm physically fit and filled with energy. What am I going to do? There's a decision.
Right. This is who I am.
This is who I am. And if I hadn't done that affirmation that day, I pretty much can tell you 9 out of 10 times I'm doing the chocolate. When I'm doing this stuff, maybe it's like 2 or 3 times I'm doing the chocolate. But the fact is I'm a lot more putting energy into who I am and who I want to be. And so, yeah, it's great stuff. One thing I'll say too about this is I mentioned Brian Tracy. Brian Tracy he's like a sales psychology of achievement guy. I listened to him like when I was in my really early 20s and I was a new stockbroker, moved to Chicago, didn't know anybody. I'd get on the bus and I'd put a cassette tape in and I'd listen to this over and over and over and over. And one of the things that I remember from that psychology of achievement course, I never forgot it, and I always mention it. And it's very relevant for what we're talking about because a lot of this is mental stuff. You know, anybody who does anything in the world, they're continually optimizing how they think and how they show up in the world. And we can talk about mastermind groups too, because I think as a part of our group, that's given me, I've had a lot of evidence of that, taking my game to the next level. That's what Tony Robbins, Richard Branson, those guys swear by that stuff. But, you know, Brian had this analogy where he said, our mind is like a garden. We have to plant seeds, put water in, and nurture the seed to have flowers grow. But weeds grow naturally. Mm-hmm. Doesn't make a difference what we do. There's always going to be crap coming up into our head. We got to take a lot of effort, you know, to put good stuff in there. And that's what this is all about. For me, it just gives me tangible stuff that I can actually do that will help me. Because some days, you know, I'm just like anybody else. I want to strangle people and I hate the world and why am I alive? And, you know, I mean, those things can happen on certain days too, but like you said, it's like a backdrop.
Yeah. I'm glad you preface it with goals on steroids. And I think what's important for me about this process is that, the manifestations on my list. So I'll give you one is I'm a best-selling author. Now, yeah, you could see that as a goal, but if I'm going to see that goal, say that as a goal, there's going to be a ridiculously long plan of action and tasks that I need to fulfill to get to that place of being a best-selling author. Or I can leave that elevated in a space that is going to manifest. So it's not so much what I'm going to do to get there. It's that I'm setting a destination that is going to happen any number of ways. And I'll give you the example. When I first was playing around with this with The Secret, was I wanted, like they said, start out with your car or your watch. And I said, go get a watch, you know, try on a watch. And I was like, oh my God, that Rolex I've been wanting forever it meant a lot to me. It had an elevated status in my mind. Now it's a beautiful piece of art, maybe a good investment, but for me it meant a lot more. So for me to go to try it on was like this really, because they said it's not important that you want it or you have, you know, positive thinking around it. It was positive feeling, and what better way to have a positive feeling than to put it on and feel what it looks like and take a picture on your wrist and then bring it to your board, your vision board, right? So they said that about driving too, and I wanted this white Range Rover Sport. I always wanted it, and again, it had this elevated status way above me. It was a trophy. It was a trophy that I needed to achieve, and they said, "Go drive it." And a couple weeks later, maybe not even that long, I was on my way to a meeting, and I said, I'm going to head over to that place after the meeting. I was wearing a nice suit, walked in, super confident, said, I want to test drive the Range and or the Sport. So, and there it was, the white one sitting in the showroom. And I had the guy take pictures of me in it, and he says, let's go for a test drive. So he pulls out this other one, this green one. And we get on the road, and I get to the stop sign. He says, push that button, and the airbags drop. And I just had this sense of disappointment. And I was like, wait a second. This is a truck. This is just a truck. And for me, I was like, I am so glad I didn't waste my time on winning this trophy, because it had me be less than. In order for me, like they say, is like for me to want that is always me wanting that, right? That's if my intention is that I want that, not that I have that, then I'm always going to want it. I'm never going to have it. And by sitting in that car, that truck, and saying, "Oh my God, this is just the whole desire or need around having that thing went away." And I was like, "Oh my God, I don't need this car. I can get it. I like it. I can get it later." But it didn't have the power for me. So I was like, "Okay, great, I get this." So I go on. Probably a day later, I was going down the bus on Michigan Avenue, and I said, "I'm gonna." I said I was going to manifest my watch. So I said, my watch is here someplace. And I get off the bus. And now Michigan Avenue, it's like you're probably going to find a Rolex someplace, right? It's not a huge leap. But I get off the bus, and I'm sort of skipping. I'm skipping because I'm so excited I'm going to find my watch. And I don't go one block. I get off at Ohio. I go back to Ontario, look across the street. There's a Rolex store. The flagship store, it just opened 3 weeks earlier. I'm like, perfect. So I run in, and I'm getting to the point. So I'm running, and I find my watch. It's a beautiful watch. And it's sort of like a green bezel, like a jade bezel with this orange lightning bolt.
I know the one.
Yeah. And I put it on, and I said, I'd love to take a picture with this. And she says, you can't take a picture. And I said, what do you mean you can't take a picture? We don't allow photography. I said, listen. If you take a picture, do you have a camera? She's like, yeah. If you take a picture of me, I promise I'll buy it here. And so this thought is starting to develop. I'll tell you what it is. But I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to manifest this watch. And she comes out, takes a picture of, in my face, not just on my hand, like in my face. So I can put it on the board, and there it is. And I said, email it to me. As I walk out, though, I said, why did I say that? Why did I say, if you take a picture of me, I'll buy it from here? Because I don't know how I'm going to get it. I just wanted it, right? I had it on a list. That was the thing I wanted. Now, I don't know if I find it. I don't know if it's a gift. I don't know if it's stolen. I don't know how I get it. Is it a prize? Is it something that I do go and buy it? And do I buy it here? Why did I limit myself to only one option? And so what's the magic of the whole process is that she never emailed it to me, right? So I don't have a responsibility to her about buying it from her. But it was a good lesson that I need to keep my manifestations at a distance. I can have that want. It doesn't need to be it probably shouldn't be a need, but I can have that want. I can have that desire for something. Material or otherwise, but I can't really hold on too tightly about how that happens. And so there's a distance for me on the manifestation list, and I try not to put things on there that I can actually achieve short term by just sheer effort. But will put things on that I really don't know how they're going to happen. And to give you the example, with my car, I'll try to. Do you want to say anything in response to anything I've said? Because it's going.
Sure, but where was when was that with the Rolex situation?
That was 2010, I was coming back from Spain because of the 4-hour work week.
Oh, okay. So this was after the 4-hour work week, and you started doing a little bit of this stuff?
No, 2009, right. 2009. I read, you gave me the 4-hour work week, and I read it. 3 weeks later, I was in Spain doing a trip that I had been invited to 5 times and said no all 5 years. Mm-hmm. I was with my new Canon that I have around the corner because I wanted a beautiful camera to photograph, and it still works. It's given me so much joy. And our friend Mike, I said, I don't want to go overseas again and not be fresh on stick. So I built a website for him in exchange for him teaching me stick again. But that was all in 3 weeks after reading reading the 4-hour work week. On the way back, I was like, all right, I'm open to this secret thing. Mm-hmm. And then when I came back, that's when all this started to roll.
Got it. So that's when you did the Rolex thing. Yeah, one thing comes to mind that's tangible with a recent experience too on, I don't know if I had it as an affirmation or on my manifestation list, but I essentially was saying that my living situation is ideal. I think I said my living and office situation is ideal. And so when I made a decision to come back to Chicago in April, and my lease was coming up at 1 East Scott Street, that was a really small place that I was at for way too long, but it was, did what it was supposed to for a period of time. But I was ready for an upgrade, and I was also ready to come back to Chicago and commit. And I knew that I had to start looking in May, June, and I think my lease was up August 1st, and I wanted to move July 1st or July 15th just to give some space. Anyway, I was all, as you know, I was bent. I decided on Amley in River North. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's my spot. I love the pool and the amenities, and there's nothing better. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking to myself, the location is a little too far south. And then when I went to go view the apartments, I'm like, these are small. They have the hardwood that I wanted, but I started to try to fit my vision of this ideal, which I left open, into this small space, and just it didn't feel right. So in any event, they started to fill up really fast, and I put it off for a little bit too long, and then the 3 apartments that I picked were gone, and then I went back, and for other reasons, basically, ran into a detour with Amley. And then sure enough, I called my friend Kevin and Mike, who are in the real estate business, and I was like, where should we go? And I saw that Walton on the Park place, and I don't know, maybe I saw some ad or whatever, but he took me over there, and voila, like I'm living in the greatest apartment that I've ever lived in my life. It's so comfortable for me, having people come over, inviting people into my home, which was part of the goal, and it's ideal. And the fact is that the second bedroom, I built it into my office, and I also have another office that I rarely go to because I love my home office so much. But that's just an example of, manifesting an ideal living arrangement, but I wanted something that wasn't the fit, and I had to let go of that. And, so there's guidance that's involved in this stuff. And that's part of why I think the law of attraction alone never worked for me, because I want like God's involvement. Mm-hmm. I don't want to just do all this stuff on my own. And if I'm going in the wrong direction, running down the path, I want to allow for, like you said, basically, you can't be rigid with how this stuff comes into reality. So I just wanted to throw that one out there.
Yeah, that's a lot came to mind there, but I think what is ultimately most powerful about that is the space you left in the statement. Is that my office, my home office is ideal, because I've had that. I was reminded about you travel at will, which is a good one. Another one you have is money comes easily and frequently, or
from expected and unexpected sources.
Right. And I had one around travel just recently. I was back a couple months ago, and it was too general. It was like this sweet spot you have to find between specific and too general. And it was about travel. Like I travel but I didn't like, how do I travel? Do I travel because I have to? Do I have to travel for work? Do I have to? No, that's not the kind of travel I want. Like, so I'm going to steal that. Like, I travel at will when I want to. And, that is, that intention is a lot clearer than, like if you just said, I want to be rich. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, well, that can happen a lot of ways. And rich in what? So, wow, you said so much, and I'm just trying to like pin back. So I think part of well, let me just tell the story about the car, mm-hmm. and then I want to loop, because we're kind of limited, and I feel like we've got another 20 minutes, but I feel like this is going to be like part one. But after that, I think loop back to vision board and really kind of get clear with what that is. So one of my, about this, even before this time last year, I was, let's say it's probably around May, I started looking for a car. I knew that I was going to be promoted. I knew I would need a car. Now, back in 2009, when I came back, having read, or I got home and I watched The Secret, and I started looking at my finances, because at that point, I guess I was check to check, but didn't need to be. And I did still have a little bit of debt, and I looked at my living situation, and I said, well, what are necessities? And I wrote down all the necessities. Then I looked at the car. I said, is this really a necessity? And it turned out it wasn't. I didn't. So I got rid of the car for 4 years, which completely flipped the script on what the cash flow. And that went along with this idea that I wanted to give more, and we can talk about that too. But I started giving more, and Facebook friends, and this idea of giving more without telling anybody or telling specific people, and around the manifestation, and which had become the affirmation of, I have more than enough. Okay, if you have more than enough, you can give, and you can give because you have more than enough. So the cycle started to happen, and as I took action to really, see what was necessary and what wasn't necessary, and started to give, that happened super quickly. Money started flowing in, and a belief due to evidence was building in me. So I knew that I could do things with faith, and that I felt protected. So no car for 4 years. Now I have to look at getting a car again. I do the whole I did the Range Rover thing, saw I didn't really need a car. There was a lot more power in letting go. This process of 4 years of letting go of things rather than acquiring things, I felt more and more stable. So I'm looking for this car. And the first car that I wanted to get was around an 2008 blue Subaru Outback. That was the car that I wanted to get. And when I looked at the numbers, it was above what I wanted to pay, because I really didn't need a car. So why am I going to spend all this money on a car? So over the next 9 months, it evolves into maybe an Audi or a Subaru Forester, all these different versions of that, looking everywhere for 9 months, finding nothing. That was the car for me. So through that process, we started doing this, or collectively, and I put it down on my manifestations. I find the car for me. I find the perfect, or I find the ideal car for me. That was it. And it really took the responsibility off my plate of what that looked like, or how that was going to happen. So January, deep freeze. I know that a promotion is coming soon. I said, you know what? I'm just gonna look at the dealer. Like, who would do that? Who would buy a used car from a dealer? So I just said, screw it, I'll look. And there it was, a 2008 blue Subaru Outback, the exact car that I had wanted in the first place. But I had figured, that I couldn't do this, or I couldn't do that, and I couldn't afford it. Well, it was like $4,000 to $5,000 cheaper than any comp on the internet, and it's sitting there at a dealer. So I get in I called and I said, "Is this that car actually there?" And wait a second, it's got the sunroof, and it's got heated seats, and it's leather, and it's this, and it's a turbo, and he's like, "Yeah, it's here." And so I got a zip car, go up there, halfway up the drive up there, which is because it's not local. I get a call from the fire department. Do you want this promotion? And I said, yeah, I want the promotion. You just paid for my car. Mm-hmm. So we get up there, and I buy the car. And so I use the car. It's freezing. It's an amazing car. Fast forward to September of this year. I've had the car 8 months, and I'm giving friends from Spain a tour, Lakeshore Drive. I get stuck at the light, and I'm like, I'm in a badass turbo. Let me just, my pride kicked up. I'm like, watch how fast the thing can go. And so I hit the accelerator, and we take off, and it starts making this crazy noise. And I'm like, oh no. Immediately I'm like, character defect. I'm like, why did I do that? But it's a Subaru. It's a twin turbos, but it's meant to go fast. So I roll into my garage, and I'm in a panic because I've been promoted again, and I start class in 2 days, but I've got to go to the firehouse for 24 hours before that. So basically it's Sunday night, and I'm thinking this is a blown engine. I've had this thing 4,000 miles. I blew an engine, and I need a car. So my girlfriend talks me off the ledge for, like, I have to say I did like start the downward spiral, like, oh my. And she goes, listen, all we need to do is get you a car. So after, about a half an hour of saying, no, I'll figure it out, I just let her do what she does. And we had a rental car for a week, and I actually kept it for 2 weeks. And I said, I'm just going to figure this out later, and I'm not going to do a lot of storytelling about how this gets fixed. It was very clear to me, based on evidence, that things can happen outside my control. And if I said to myself, do not write that short list, because that short list is, this is a $10,000 engine. You only paid $15,000 for the car. Don't even go into that math, the psychology of that math. What do you do? Now it's sitting, you junk it? What do you that whole storyline, I couldn't go there. I said, I'm just going to leave space for something else to happen, or something more to happen. So after about a week, I have it towed up there. She calls me back 2 days later and says, looks like it's, if it's just the bottom of the engine, it's going to be about $4,300. If, we can sort of save the rods, but if it's the top of the engine, it's going to be $8,900. And I'm like, oh my God. But I don't really go there. I said, thank you. And I said, considering I bought it from you guys 4,000 miles ago, and it is out of warranty, but I've just bought it from you. Is there anything else we can do? And she says, you know what? I'm sorry. I didn't see your history that you bought it with us. And she goes, let me get back to you. Oh no, she says, well, maybe we can get some used parts.
Didn't they give you a loaner?
Yeah, I had a loaner the whole time.
From them.
Once I towed it up there.
I got it.
So I had, yeah. So they were awesome, right? They gave me this beautiful loaner for, a week and a half while they were looking at it and making decisions, and more or less. And she goes, well, maybe we can get used parts. And I'm thinking in my head, that's not what I meant. Mm-hmm. But okay, because I see the dollar signs getting smaller. I'm like, okay, well, let's see what used parts. And she goes, let me get back to you. She calls back 2 hours later and says, well, again, I want to apologize for not looking at your history. So I called the Subaru parts dealer, the regional parts dealer, and he's going to buy your engine. And I said, what? She said, yeah, he's just going to buy your engine out of goodwill. You bought it from us, and it is out of warranty, but you did your oil changes and everything. And she said, but it's going to be about 3 weeks because we have to order a new engine from Japan. Is it okay if you just stick with the loaner? And I was like, but there was so there's gratitude, right? So it's easy. It's easy to say, oh my God, you spent $15,000 on this car, the one that was supposed to be your ideal car, and then the engine blew. Like, how is that a good thing? Because it led me to this opportunity to have faith that there was something else out there other than my this idea of worrying, like worrying myself into a solution or worrying myself into something I don't want or being limited. It was this incredible opportunity to say, I think that there's something else that's going to happen. I don't want to put a name to it. I just want to know that it's something better than what I can think of. And boom, that happened.
Yeah, because it was your ideal car on the front end. And, how do we know? That's the other thing that I try to go back to sometimes as well when like real setbacks, quote unquote, kick in and things that I feel, it just something happened against me. It was a negative outcome, something that was a challenge. A lot of times I try to, just turn that over and say, there's some positive that can come out of this. Typically it's inversely correlated to how bad something is too. Like, if it's just a trip on the sidewalk and I stub my toe, I'm not expecting too much, but if it's a life event, and I find that that's why this is also important, because I think one thing when you walk through that story, knowing you through that time, you thought about this a lot. It was going on. It was like a battle in your head at times around what's going on here. And so it's awesome. Not everything's going to work out that way, in terms of that perfect, but sometimes it does. And that's what's cool about, this stuff, because I've gotten to the point where a lot of times if I'm in my best state, if I'm affirming who I really am, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen out of this? Anything can happen. Anything. And that's why I love getting back to this sort of like almost, I don't know if it's childlike expectancy, but kind of. And that's what's fun about it as well. And if it's a disappointment, you know what? So be it. And you'll get over it and you'll learn something from it. There's always a message, but that was a cool one.
Yeah, and just to tie it all today, on the drive here today, just coming back home, I was sitting at a light, checking my phone, which, I'm in the safety business. That's kind of bad. But I'm at a light, red light, looking at my phone, stopped. I get rear-ended. I get rear-ended, and what comes to mind is my relationship with that car. It's like that whole experience, like in the moment, like, oh my God, I just got hit. I mean, the panic goes into, I just had all this work done and now I got to do this. And it's not that I'm going to freak. I know I'm not going to freak out on anybody. I'm also immediately thinking like, this is what you get, even though you weren't responsible for it. You're on your phone. You got to stop that. But so I get out of the car and I look, right. I mean, I got hit. I mean, I jumped forward, my head hit the, boom. And I know I'm okay. And I get out and look at the car, and there's nothing wrong with the car. Like, I look on both sides. I mean, I really got hit. And I look in the back bumper, nothing. I look on the other side, nothing. And I go, I have the ideal car. I have the ideal car for this situation.
The car's invincible.
For this moment, just to get hit. And I turn around, and I'm like, and I'm processing that, wait a second, I think the car is fine. And I turn around, and the guy's getting out of the car, and I know him. And he walks up. He goes, he just looks at me. He says, is it okay? And I go, yeah, I think it's okay. He says, all right, if it's not okay, give me a call. And I was like, you got it. And that alone, take out of the car story. That, like, I'm grateful for that. Like, I'm so glad I got hit by someone that I know versus some other thing where I immediately in my head, I'm like, all right, nothing's wrong with the car, but I've got to get this guy's information. I've got to get his license. I've got, just in case something is, maybe I got hurt. None of that. If something's wrong, let me know. And I was just like, and boom, like, there's that opportunity, boom, right on 1010. Grateful for, awareness.
Right. Yeah, and real quick too, just around one thing that came to mind around the car story is like, it's one of these cliches, but it's a good reminder. Do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? You could have easily gotten caught up for weeks around those bastards up there, these car dealerships. It's only been 4,000 miles. I've been robbed. This is a lemon. They knew this was the case.
Right.
And you would have been right in your own mind, but you could have also gone through that, as mostly I think you did, with happiness, openness, grace. And all it really comes back to is how it's affecting us in our life, with our relationships, our challenges that happen with things that we don't think it's the way that we expected. I just read about a woman from The Bachelor show who committed suicide this week, and she's in her mid-30s, and they talked about, some emotional problems. She would go to the highest highs and the lowest lows, so maybe she had some bipolar depression going on. Certainly, I think anybody who commits suicide has depression. But she, one of the comments was, it was tough for her to deal with things. She made decisions on how her life should look, and when it didn't happen that way, she had a tough time dealing with it. And maybe that's very, very extreme in the sense that, if you're dealing with emotional stuff, which, there's different levels of that. But I read that and I was like, good reminder on, when things don't go as I want them to, as I expect. Because truly, if there is the universe, if God's looking out for us, then I don't know what's coming next in a lot of cases, and He does. And I don't necessarily want to think that I know how it's all mapped out. And even if it usually the way that I want it to look, maybe it looks okay, but unless it really has happened in a certain way that I'm grateful for a lot of times, or if I can continue to be grateful, it gets tarnished anyway, So anyway, and I don't know, we don't have a lot of time on part one if it is, but you want to talk about what would you like to get into at the end?
Well, just as an exercise for someone who wants to get into this, just to review 3 parts of the list, right? So there's any way you want to do it, gratitude, affirmation, manifestation, affirmation, gratitude, manifestation. Make those lists. Just and what I was told in the beginning is you don't necessarily have to do this like 10 manifestations. Keep it simple, because you don't want to expend energy on not being on something that you're not really clear about. And then also, it's not going to be perfect, and it's maybe something you don't even like, but you can return to that, constantly return to that, and it will become something that's authentic for you. So that's the 10-10-10, very basic. We didn't even get to what I really want to get into with that stuff. But since we've mentioned it so much, why don't you just explain what the vision board is?
Yeah, so I would highly encourage anyone who wants like a shot in the arm with some of these tools to grab the book, The Answer by John Assaraf, Assaraf. It's a great read. Never had anybody who's done it that has not liked it at a minimum. And if you choose to do it, in terms of, the first time I read the book, I read the first half, made me feel good, and then it started asking me questions. I didn't really want to do that, so I put it back on the bookshelf for a year until finally I just was like, I got to do something, and I ended up with my college roommate. Him and I made an accountability pact. We're going to finish all this and meet, in a week or two and discuss it. So I would also encourage people that if you have somebody that you want to do this with, get some support group, whether it's right out of the gate or it's afterwards. It's always good to keep an eye out for like-minded people, but that will get you going in the direction of starting to think about these things. And in that book, you get to tackle 2 of the really 4 pieces of what we're talking about, which is affirmations and vision board, because they do a good job in there of talking about how that should look, what you do. I took specific affirmations that they gave as examples, and you still use some of those today. I have a lot of my own that I've made over the years and that I've adjusted. The vision board thing, this is just really it's just another tool. Assaraf is huge on these things. He talked about in the story, even in The Secret, I think he talked about the story where he was in his new home in Southern California, in his new office, and his son was sitting on one of the boxes, and he was like tapping his feet and like, "What's in here, Dad?" And he was like, "Get out of here. I got to work." That's what he was thinking. But he looked and he was like, "Oh, those are my vision boards." And the kid was like, "What's a vision board?" So he pulls them out and he ends up taking one from like literally, years and years
It was
earlier.
like 5 years ago.
5 years ago when he was in Indiana and he was like in the insurance business, and he took this house, a photo. He was looking at the photo of the home that he had on his vision board, and he's like, this looks really familiar. And he realized it wasn't a house like the one that he had bought in his new dream home in California. It was the exact home. I believe that's true. And I think that it just is a really aligned example of, having this stuff, come and manifest, And so the vision board is a tool of staring at something every single day to sit there. I had one, I'll give an example of, there's one vision board where just last summer I had one of them come true after I created this 3.5 years ago. And it was, there were certain things that popped all the time. And one of them was Europe. I just had Europe on there. And last summer I toured Europe for 6 weeks from late July until early September. And I'm doing it again next year, but for the places I didn't hit. But some of them happened quickly and some happened slowly, but it was in my grill all the time. And it was like, there's something about that. And like you said, I think it's important to stress that, if you can especially put feeling behind the reality of you being in that position when you're staring at the vision board. I have a Bernese Mountain Dog on there. I want a dog. I travel too much. I move around way too often to get a dog and take that responsibility. But it's part of what I want in my future. And so it's a reminder of that, what I really, truly want. So the book does a great job with the vision board part, with the affirmation part. And then simply, if this stuff resonates with someone after they start to read that, I think you can easily either just get Creating Sales Velocity on Amazon by Matthew Ferry and read that 10-10 visualization chapter. Or you just simply, if you have a list of 10 affirmations and you have your vision board, then you just create a list of 10 things that you're grateful for and 10 things that you want to manifest. And we've talked about this too, where the manifestation list and the affirmation list can kind of be like one hand washing the other. They're not exactly the same, but there's some overlap perhaps. And some of it's just a new way of like looking at the Rubik's Cube and then phrasing it in a different way. And manifest allows me to get, in some cases, I get pretty specific. Affirmations, I leave a little bit more general. But also, I guess, so the answer is great. Creating Sales Velocity for anybody who's in business that wants to do that duo. And a couple of other books that have just been really good for me in terms of this whole mindset is, you talked about the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, which I think is awesome. And in fact, I realized that when I first read that book, because I was so ready to change the way my life looked, I never finished it. I got it so quick that I just like ran out the door and started doing some of this stuff. Yeah. And it really has become part of my life. I don't work 4 hours a week. I work a lot more than that. But the fundamental basis of, doing it from anywhere and throttling it up and down has been a part of my life for a few years now. And then the last one I'll say, and would like to hear your comments about getting started, is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Just as a general sort of spiritual consciousness awareness book around, ego and deflation of ego and being in the moment instead of worrying about the past or projecting in the future. I think that book is really good too if somebody's in a place where, if you haven't read it.
Hey, and that's where the podcast shut off. I had an alarm set on my phone. We were recording on the phone, and the alarm went off. The podcast stopped recording, and the end was decided for us. So we've gone on to do a second half, a part 2 of the podcast on abundance and manifestation, and we dug deep. We realized that we had talked a lot in general terms, some specifics, but more general terms than we wanted to. So in the second podcast, we dug deep on specific details and practices that we've practiced, and it keeps on evolving. And we actually learned a lot from each other in that second podcast. So please tune in again when that podcast is published. It's probably going to be either next week or the week after that. Eric and I will be in Brazil on next week. So we're going to record another podcast from Florianopolis on the beaches of Brazil, which should be cool. Thanks for listening, and tune in again next week.